What's going on, guys? Alex here. Today, I'm answering your tax questions from Reddit. So this question has to do with setting up a payment plan with the IRS, and it is provided by Cummins87. Setting up a payment plan with the IRS. I have to pay my taxes, but I can't afford to pay them all at once. My plan was to call and set up a payment plan with the IRS, but then the COVID crisis happened, and I don't know what to do. Any help would be appreciated. All right, so the IRS phone systems are, for the most part, shut down given all the craziness that's going on with this coronavirus situation. So calling them may result in a bad time right about now because no one's really manning the phones. So that leaves online means of setting up a payment agreement, which are thankfully pretty good. So to back up a little bit, what are we even talking about? So let's say that you finish your tax return, you finish preparing that bad boy, and you look down on the tax due line and you have a little bit of a heart attack. You didn't expect to owe that much, and now you're caught. You didn't really have a chance to plan accordingly, and you don't have the funds set aside to pay the tax. Unfortunately, this is a very common occurrence, so definitely don't feel like you're the only one going through this. Now, in terms of addressing that, one way to approach it is certainly setting up a payment plan or an installment agreement. They're synonymous. And what it really means is that once you have your balance due, which is, let's say, $10,000, $20,000, what have you, you can't pay it up front. You can structure a payment plan to pay that amount over time. And it can even be auto-debited from your bank account, which is super efficient and easy to avoid forgetting making a payment down the line. So there are definite benefits to putting together an installment agreement. Some of the downsides are the fact that penalties will still accumulate. So throughout that time that you're paying it off, you will be penalized for the late payments. And there's also interest that it's going to be charged on those amounts. So you have penalties and interest to look out for and deal with throughout that payment plan process. There are also some fees that we're going to take a look at to get that payment plan in place. But those are some downsides they have to deal with if you want to pay over time. But ultimately, if you do get a payment plan in place, it lets you breathe a little easier knowing that the IRS is going to generally pause many of the collection actions that they would ordinarily take because you're on their radar. You made the step of taking on that payment agreement, so they take it easy on you generally. It's a good step to take to avoid the ugliness that can happen if you don't pay your taxes and you don't get an installment agreement in place because you're going to get a bunch of nasty grams, we call it. So how do you even approach this? Let's pull up the IRS website, and I'll show you just how to Google this. You go payment plan, IRS tax, should pull it right up. And here's the link that comes up, payment plan, Internal Revenue Service. And it says apply online for a payment plan. Very straightforward. So in the individual side of things, let's assume that that's what we're dealing with. Let's take a look at some of the information that's here. It says that your specific tax situation will determine which payment plan options are available to you. Payment options include full payment. It's a great option. A short-term, nice of them to offer that. A short-term payment plan paying in 120 days or less, or a long-term payment plan, installment agreement, payment of in more than 120 days. So the first really decision point is how long is it going to take you to pay it off? Can you pay it off quickly, less than 120 days, or 6 months, or is it going to take you more than 6 months? If it takes you more than 6 months, the requirements are a little bit more stringent. If you could pay it off more quickly, then it's a little bit easier to get this going. Now, it says here you may qualify to apply online if, for a long-term payment plan, you owe $50,000 or less in combined tax, penalties, and interest, and filed all required returns. That's an important stipulation because they want you to file the returns before they're going to budge on the payment side of things. Now, it says on the short-term payment plan, you owe less than $100,000 in combined tax, penalties, and interest. So what they're saying here is if you want the long term, then the limit is $50,000 in combined taxes, penalties, and interest, and you need to have filed all your returns. So they're saying that you can have a longer payment plan, but you have to owe less to qualify for that to be able to register online. Let's remember, this doesn't preclude you from having a payment plan, period. We're just talking about registering for one online with these particular requirements. So got a little bit of the sniffles. Now, if you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor, you can apply for a payment plan as an individual. Fair enough. All right. So what do you need to apply for a payment plan? You need the following information: your name exactly as it appears on your most recently filed tax return, valid email address, address for most recently filed tax return, date of birth, filing status, pretty basic stuff. And they're going to verify your identity and so forth. Pretty straightforward. Now, how much does it cost? Because it's not free in some cases, depending on your circumstances. So if you owe a balance of over $25,000 and you make automatic payments from your checking account, then essentially the following fees apply. If you pay now, no setup fee and no penalties or interest are added. They're so gracious that if you pay the full balance, no penalties and no interest. Isn't that nice? All right, so obviously that's not going to apply to too many people going to this website, I don't think. But if we look at the short-term payment plan of 120 days or less, we see that there's still $0 setup fee, and you will accrue penalties and interest until the balance is paid in full. We talked about that. Another thing to note is if you're paying by a credit card, there are fees that apply, generally 3 some odd percent, because the IRS is passing on those costs to you. Aside from that, if you are looking at a long-term payment plan, we talked about short-term, 120 days or less. Now it's long-term. And if you pay in more than 6 months, then if you have automatic withdrawals, you pay a $31 setup fee. If you have low income, there could be some flexibility there as far as getting that fee waived. And then penalties and interest are going to accrue throughout the entire duration of the payment plan. Alternatively, you can pay each month without direct debit, but you will pay a higher setup fee of $149. If you have low income, that fee can be lowered to $43. That may be reimbursed if certain conditions are met. So there's some details about that you can look at if you click the link here. And then penalties and interest will accrue as usual. All right. How do I review or revise an existing plan? You can actually log into the online tool, which the button is down here. I'm going to reference it in a second. And you can actually add your payment agreement from 1 year to a prior year. It's not great because you're increasing the amount of taxes that you didn't pay. Not a perfect situation to be in, but it's something that is available as an option. So you don't have different staggered payments for various tax years. It's more of a single payment that you're paying to the IRS once a month. So you have the ability to add your current debt due to a prior tax year's installment agreement so that everything comes out as one payment. Now, in terms of actually applying for it online, it's a very easy process. You see this blue button right here? You click that bad boy. Now, I'm filming this at 1:30 in the morning, so this service does not work this late at night. It's not really for us night owls. But if you approach this website and click this link during normal human hours, you will be able to set up an installment agreement. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of my clients do it themselves. They know their balance due on their tax return, and they go ahead and get this filled out. Usually takes just a few minutes, and they have an installment agreement. So this is an alternative to calling the IRS for that installment agreement because right now, quite frankly, they are not going to answer the phone. So that's kind of what it is. And we have a question here from Sean. Let's see here. He says, I can't afford to file for 2019, 2018. How do I get the stimulus payment? Okay. All right. Let's take a little detour. Now, if you're an individual that has not filed prior tax years, the IRS has taken that possibility into account, and they set up a site for that situation. But let's first understand if it would be applicable. So, Sean, give me 1 second. I'm going to get that answered for you. Now, if you Google stimulus payment IRS no tax return filed. All right, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so I'm going to throw this link in the chat for you, and we're going to ascertain whether this link is applicable for you. All right, so non-filers enter payment info here. This is brand new too. So before coronavirus, this thing didn't exist, so I have to understand it right alongside with you, but let's see if this was helpful for you. When should I use the non-filers payment tool? The scenarios are available here. Okay, so you can use the tool if you meet the following requirements. You're a U.S. citizen. If you had gross income that did not exceed $12,200 for 2019, and you did not file a return for 2018 or 2019 and were not otherwise required to file a federal income tax return for tax year 2019. All right, so there are a few scenarios broken out here. So let me send this over as well. So you have that. Okay, you already looked here. So there are also payment options available whereby, or filing options available rather, if you make less than $60,000. So let's see, $60,000, free file, IRS tax. Okay, so have you used free file yet? Let me know. If you have not, that may be something to consider. All right, so there's an infographic here. So the Free File Alliance is a program that was put forth by the IRS working together with private software providers like TurboTax and things like that. And essentially, if you make $60,000 or less in a particular year, then you're eligible for the Free File program, whereby you can file tax returns without paying anything for tax preparation. Now, first, it says here, if you go to irs.gov/freefile, that's how you start the process. All right. And that's where you examine some of the partners that are available to help you file your returns. Because if you don't qualify for the non-filers criteria here, you may qualify to file your taxes for free. Alrighty, so if you choose online free file based on your income, you have income $69,000 and below, free file online products, and then you even have income above $69,000. There might be some products available there, but generally, this is where you'd look to file for free. So let's just click that. All right, free file online lookup tool. Now, if you could see here, there are some different offers available from H&R Block, Easy Tax Return, TaxSlayer, Free Tax USA, what have you. And the idea is that if you meet their requirements, you can file tax returns for free, meaning no fees generally. And some of them even have a free state return that you can rely on. Now, let's just take a look at the H&R Block requirements here. And I've got my own opinions about H&R Block, but let's just move forward here, put those aside. I'm trying to help. So this program has the following requirements. Receive a free federal return if your AGI, adjusted gross income, is $69,000 or less, and your age is between 17 and 51, or you're eligible for the earned income tax credit, or you're free for active military, adjusted gross income of $69,000 or less, and you have a free state return if you qualify for the federal return. So this might be a possibility you can explore here, and obviously you want to take a look at some of these different offers and see which one's most applicable for you. And let's see what happens if we click on, I don't know, H&R Block. Let's see where that takes us. Okay, so file free federal and state taxes with the IRS Free File program delivered by H&R Block. And if you meet their criteria, you can start filing your tax returns. Now, the question is this available for prior tax years? Let's see. Let's try to click this here. All right, they go straight into this here. So I have a lot of ad blockers on and script blockers on and things like that, so this might not go over too smoothly on this particular computer because I had to disable a lot of that stuff. But this is where I would look in terms of getting your tax returns filed for those outstanding tax years. You may look into IRS Free File to get the returns filed, and that could help you secure that stimulus payment for the year. Now, just so you know, the stimulus payment is technically linked to your 2020 tax return, all right? So you can get by, Sean, if you don't file 2018, don't file 2019, assuming you're not required to file those returns. Otherwise, you should. When you file your 2020 return, if you qualify based on your 2020 return, you will get that stimulus payment. That's how the rules were structured. So one aspect that you can look into is if you're not required to file 2018, you weren't required to file 2019, if you want to avoid all this hassle of dealing with free file and all of this other stuff, then you can wait to file your 2020 return. And if based on that, you have less than 75,000 AGI, let's just look this up and confirm all this stuff here. So stimulus, IRS, coronavirus requirements, tax. All right. So this is the tax relief, economic impact payments. All right, so here is a good frequently asked questions for you. Again, if you're using your 2020 returns, that can allow you to not really worry about 2018 or 19. It will delay, though, when you will receive that stimulus payment, because now it's based on the 2020 return that you'd file by April 15th, 2021. But ultimately, down the line, there would be some benefit for you. So let's take a look at these questions, make sure you are eligible. All right, so it says you're eligible to receive a payment if you're a U.S. citizen, cannot be claimed as dependent on somebody else's return, you have a social security number, and have AGI, or adjusted gross income, below an amount based on your filing status. We'll get a little bit more detail on that. Now, let's see here. Okay, so it talks about the fact that there's some flexibility here in terms of when a return needs to be filed and so forth. But let's see if there's an actual situation here that addresses your question. All right, so I'm not seeing it there. All right, so it does mention here the 2020 returns. Okay. It doesn't address it outright, but the way it's structured is that if you, based on 2020, qualify for the stimulus payment, if your AGI is less than $75,000, I believe. Let's take a look at that as well. AGI, bam, bam, bam. All right, so this is CNBC article here. And then if we find out, okay. All right, so you can earn up to $75,000 as an individual. So if that's your filing status, you would qualify for the full stimulus payment, and that would be based on your 2020 return. Let's see here if 2020 is mentioned here. Okay. All right. And it says here, when you file your 2020 tax return, your return will likely be topped off if you receive less than you were due. All right, so that's a little bit of confirmation for you, Sean, if you were looking for it, in terms of how everything's going to play out. So if you were not required, I just threw that link in the chat for you. If you weren't required to file your 2018 or 2019 returns, you don't even have to deal with the free file and all this other stuff. You can go directly to your 2020 returns, get those filed. If you meet the requirements from an adjusted gross income perspective for your filing status, which some of those numbers are outlined here, then you're good to rock and roll. You're gravy. So let me know if I answered your question in the chat there. Hopefully this was helpful for you, Sean. But other than that, let's go back to our original question at the moment and just touch on setting up a payment plan with the IRS. So we talked about the fact that there could be some costs involved. We talked about the fact that there's different treatment depending on whether it's less than 6 months or more than 6 months. All right. So we got an update here from Sean. You're saying, I'm actually really scared. I have 1099 from jiu-jitsu job at gym since 2015. I made close to 12 to 20 grand each year. I never filed. I'm scared. So if it's a situation where you didn't file tax returns and you should have, then you definitely need to take a look at that and see kind of how things are going to play out. Now, that's a whole separate situation from talking about the stimulus payment. Now we're talking about looking back at those prior years and seeing if there's liability there that might be assessed. Now, if you're a 1099, then there might be the situation that you had to have filed self-employment tax returns or Schedule SE and calculated self-employment taxes. So if you have self-employment income, then you would have needed to file Schedule C essentially if the net income is over $400. So that's a separate consideration, meaning that if you have outstanding tax returns where you should have filed in prior years, you may want to work with an accountant to see how to best address that. And if you have any payment plan that you need to put in place resulting from the prior years, you can go ahead and get that taken care of so you don't have to pay everything all at once. Eventually, this is going to catch up to you at some point, most likely, because the IRS, they could be a little bit slow, but you do have to give them credit for being able to catch taxpayers that aren't filing returns when they're supposed to. And you have to think about the fact that if you receive the 1099, you're getting one copy, the IRS is getting the other copy. And they know that you had that income. So the longer you kind of space it out and don't address this, the problem can grow bigger because you're accumulating penalties and interest. So it's something that you may want to reach out to an accountant and talk about it to see if there's some way to make sure that you could take care of 2018, 2019, get caught up. And then for 2020, you should be all set to file your tax return and possibly receive that $1,200 stimulus payment. All right. So, and definitely you should breathe, take it easy, don't stress. A lot of people get into situations where they have to work things out with the IRS, but hey, at the end of the day, you take care of it and you can focus on other things in life. So hopefully this was helpful for you. And, going back to, the payment plan, if you do need to take advantage of that, if you have 2018, 2019, you file those returns and you figure, wow, I owe $5,000 for 2018, I owe $2,000 for 2019, I don't have the cash on hand, then you could possibly look into setting up a payment plan. The one thing I wanted to mention regarding the question about the setting up of the payment plan initially was the coronavirus situation has pushed back a lot of the deadlines, right? So the IRS has delayed a lot of these particular payment and filing deadlines to July 15th, 2020. So let's see here. It says the notice postpones filing and payment of federal income taxes for the following forms. So in general, don't quote me for all the different forms and things like that, but in general, you do want to make sure that you can take advantage of the extended deadline. So if you filed your return for 2019 and you owe money, let's say $5,000, $10,000, I wouldn't rush to put an installment plan in place when you can delay the entire payment of this thing until July 15th. Now, the states can be different, so be careful with the states. But for federal purposes, in 2019 or in 2020, for tax year 2019, I wouldn't rush to put an installment agreement together right now. You should figure out how much you can pay by July 15th and get as much of that paid off by July 15th, and then you can put in place an installment agreement. And maybe by that point, the IRS will be back in action and answering the phones. Who knows? But in terms of the payment plan for just 2020 as it pertains to tax year 2019, you may want to consider taking advantage of those extended deadlines, paying as much as you can because you're avoiding penalties and interest. Whatever's left over, you put an installment plan in place and you take care of that bad boy. All right. So hopefully this was helpful, guys. If you liked the video, click that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon, drop a comment, drop a like. Let me know you're out there. I'm having fun. It's 2 a.m. The tea is flowing, and I can't stop. This is too good. So hopefully this was helpful, guys. Thanks for watching.